Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. Today's date is March 21st, 2021. And in this video, we're going to be commenting on a Mike Figuerado video. That's the Humanist report talking about Tulsi Gabbard and cancel culture. We'll evaluate the quality of that video and see what's going on there politically. If you like this video, please click the like button and the subscribe button and consider supporting us on Patreon. There's a link to the Patreon in the video description. So, like I said in this video, Mike Figuerado of the Humanist Report, that channel is part of what I term the SOCDEM gang. This is a softer left to even sort of center-right group. Kyle Kulinski, Jimmy Dore, people like that, who are social democrats for the most part, tend to cling to the Democratic Party, more or less, not necessarily in all cases, but generally speaking, these people are not Marxists. They are to our right, we being Marxist socialists. And so, I like to comment on SOCDEM gang videos as they sort of struggle to articulate a kind of populism or something that is left of who they call the shit libs or establishment Democrats or corporate Democrats. Our position on this channel is that the Democratic Party is just a toxic, flaming garbage dump, and you just can't deal with it at all. The only thing you can do is oppose it. You can't work within it, etc. Without further comment, let's get into Mike Figuerado and see what's going on here.
Of course, Fox News is still on their cancel culture kick, and recently they brought on an expert that knows a lot about cancel culture. I'm talking, of course, about Tulsi Gabbard. And she knows a lot about cancel culture because she just tried to cancel trans people and abortions and BDS not too long ago. So she knows what she's talking about. So Trey Gowdy, who is now a Fox News host, brought her on to get her input. And she says some really, really silly things. And she takes like the hysteria over cancel culture to the next level, like levels that I didn't think were possible, to the point where I'm actually impressed that she was able to make that large of a leap. Having said that, though, I don't want to start with a Tulsi clip. I want to show you Trey Gowdy's little opener here, because he honestly, surprisingly enough, he exhibited like some level of self-awareness that I didn't expect him to even be capable of. So he asks some basic questions about cancel culture that I think that people who are interested in the subject should be asking. Take a look.
Okay, reasonable enough intro. Before we get into the Trey Gowdy clip, I just want to offer a few comments. So we are not supporters of Tulsi Gabbard here on this channel. So first of all, when you're evaluating a political movement, you can't just look at the figure in front of it, such as Bernie Sanders or Tulsi Gabbard or whoever. You also have to look at the quality of sort of the typical person that it attracts. Who are the demographics of that movement? What's the class composition of the movement, etc. You look at the Tulsi Gabbard movement, for example. I've never met so many creepy people like in one place outside of just an outright libertarian, sort of forum. The Tulsi Gabbard Tulsel movement. I mean, it got that name Tulsel for a reason. That would, of course, be Tulsi and incel combined. Creepy folks, by and large. People would often give Tulsi Gabbard credit for being anti-war or anti-interventionist. This is really, in my opinion, just an extension of the kind of Ron Paul, paleo-con type of anti-intervention or anti-war stance, which is to say they're not socialist, they're not anti-imperialist in the sense that a socialist is, meaning socialists since Lenin's time, and maybe earlier, have realized, although Lenin stated it very well in his work, Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism, that basically capitalism, once it gets developed to a certain point, global monopoly capitalism, when you have big cartels that are very consolidated, capital is, just operating at a global level, it has to take on a set of characteristics that we came to call imperialism. As there becomes less and less to take, they have to work harder and harder to open foreign markets by force. There's a whole series of characteristics around that. It's unavoidable is the point. So if you're really opposed to war on, anything other than the sort of, simplistic basis of war that, I mean, you hear some libertarians talking about, war is only okay if there's like a direct act of aggression, blah, blah, blah. The non-aggression principle, force and fraud, all that stuff. The thing is, we don't live several centuries or millennia ago when it was like, the bear tribe fighting with the bird tribe or whatever. Like, in those cases, first of all, war was not a mechanized, industrialized process that would result in millions and millions of deaths. It was a partly ceremonial procedure that, I mean, even within a war, certain care was taken to contain the violence to more of a contest, if you will, of, who's going to get the rights to whatever. It's not like that today. War is carried out by vast industrial conglomerates and monopolies, and it's partly done to liquidate surplus labor. It's a lot more complicated now, the forces driving war. It's not just like you and your neighbor had a dispute over, the boundary line between your property. War is not that simple in the 20th, 21st century at all. If we want to be anti-war in the 21st century, we need to be anti-imperialist, which means being anti-capitalist. These are things that the Ron Paul, libertarian, Tulsi Gabbard axis are not. So I don't give them that much credit, first of all, because they're not anti-imperialist, really. Also, if you take a deeper look at Tulsi Gabbard's anti-war stance, she says that she's against, quote, regime change wars, such as Iraq, where the U.S. said they wanted to get Saddam Hussein out, which, I mean, even that's more complicated than the United States said, but anyway, but she does support the war on terror. She says that she supports wars where the U.S. is going into whatever country to fight ISIS or Al-Qaeda or whatever. Never mind the fact that the war on terror is just a cover story for imperialist power grabs. The pipeline in Afghanistan, I mean, Halliburton, was anyone at all awake during the 2000s at all? I mean, it was laid out pretty clearly in the Bush-Cheney years when, of course, the war on terror was launched. It was so anyway, she's in support of that, which is thinly veiled resource grabs in the first place, and just plays for, territorial dominance throughout the Middle East and Central Asia under this guise of fighting terrorism. So that's Tulsi Gabbard's anti-war stance. She scored some points in some of the Democratic debates, for saying those things, whereas the other Democrats can't even admit that these wars are destructive at all to just peace and stability. They're just committed to a different level of lie about it, a deeper level of lie. So by contrast, she looks good. But anyway, we then see her embracing all kinds of these like paleocon conservative points on other topics. So let's get into that now. I don't know exactly where this is going to go. Let's check it out.
Is it new, or is it something that's been around for a long time and we just renamed it? Who gets to decide who or what is canceled? It was the summer before I started the 9th grade when the movie Grease came out. You may remember that movie, Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta. So my mom decided she would take my 3 sisters and me to see the movie. And we made it about 30 minutes into the movie when my mom leaned over and said, "We're leaving. Get your sisters. We're leaving." Leaving? You got to be kidding me. Olivia Newton-John hasn't even put on her black leather outfit yet. You cannot be serious. But my mom was serious. She was very serious. My entire school was in that movie theater that day. It was so embarrassing. I'm barely able to talk about it today. My mom grabbing her 4 children and walking out. My mom canceled the rest of that movie for me. And she was not the only parent I had who engaged in cultural cancellation. My 3 sisters and I could not watch Happy Days. We could not watch.
So I know we're not all the way through it, but can I just say what a pointless anecdote this is? This is not what cancel culture is about. First of all, calling it cancel culture is buying into a right-wing narrative to begin with. But the basic idea, just to correct course a little bit, is that people want to have influence over corporate and institutional behavior in some kind of way. That's what canceling is about, okay? People don't even say cancel anymore. I mean, I think that we've just moved on to this general concept of boycotts and demonstrating dissatisfaction, displeasure with institutional or corporate behavior, trying to get particular outcomes. We live in an age where corporations are just, running roughshod. There are very few legal protections for workers, etc. People are trying desperately to exert however small, some kind of influence that they can. We're not here to debate the pros and cons of that, but generally speaking, I think that that's not a crazy idea, that we're demanding some accountability, some measure of democracy in our social environment, that these institutions should be responsive to public opinion. Also, we'll see where he goes with that, but conservatives would have book burnings in decades past. It's just ironic now that people are growing tired of the right wing, or at least those who are tired of the right wing are growing increasingly vocal about it. They're just fine with canceling whatever. They'll cancel Black History Month, but they don't call it cancel culture when they do that, or when they don't teach labor history or whatever else. Their only problem is with being held accountable. And then the shrill chorus of dozens of conservatives crying victim is what fills the air following that. Let's continue with this story of a conservative being parented by a conservative parent.
Gilligan's Island or Sesame Street. So you can forget about Dallas or Dynasty or Flamingo Road. Was that the cancel culture, or was that my parents deciding they wanted to control what their children were exposed to? And once I got married, I actually came to long for my parents' rules on TV. They were nothing compared to my wife's rules. She can hear a bad word through 3 walls and a mute button. I had to check into a hotel to watch True Detective. And Game of Thrones, she still doesn't know I watched that.
Okay, I hope this anecdote is coming to an end soon. This is weird, unhealthy, and kind of disturbing, actually.
Well, I guess now she does. Is that the cancel culture?
Wait, hang on. So you're telling me that this cancel culture phenomenon isn't actually new? That it's been around for a long time, and that the outrage over cancel culture is inorganic and even, dare I say, manufactured? Interesting. And it's funny that he brings up Grease, because his mom not letting him watch Grease, I guess that you can say that that is an example of cancel culture. It's weird that he would want to watch Grease. Like, I remember when I was a kid, my mom, she let me pick out a movie. It was a VHS tape, of course, because I am very old. And it was between Grease and Aladdin 2, The Return of Jafar. And my mom really sold me on Grease. Like, she was like, look, you have to get Grease. There's lots of singing and music in it. And I'm like, I don't really want to hear singing and music. And she's like, no, it's really, you're going to love it. Like, it's super exciting. So my mom sold me on Grease. And then we took it home. I bought it instead of Aladdin, and I threw a fucking temper tantrum because I thought it was terrible and hated it. So it's funny that he wanted to watch Grease. That's neither here nor there. I don't know how I got on that tangent. It just made me think of that. But what he says here, it is really... It's interesting to me. You don't really see that much introspection from people obsessed with cancel culture, but really this is something that's always been around. Like, evangelical Christians have tried to cancel every minority in the United States. Gays, they tried to cancel interracial marriages. Now they're trying to cancel trans people. So, it's nice to see him use this anecdote because it shows that, like, this entire conversation that we're having, it's not really anything new. It's almost weird that all of a sudden this is what the right is choosing to focus on because they don't have any other ideas. Having said that, though, he brings on Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard, she takes things to the next level and somehow is even more bombastic and hysterical about this issue than Trey Gowdy, of all people. Like, I would not have expected Trey Gowdy to be the more reasonable one in a segment featuring Trey Gowdy and Tulsi Gabbard. Nonetheless, here we are. Take a look at what she says is basically the logical conclusion of cancel culture.
Okay, so Mike and I basically agree on that topic, so good job, Mike. And as far as Tulsi Gabbard, just before we get into her, let's just recall, she got about 1% of the vote, maybe a little less in the Democratic primary. She dropped out, I think, after the second primary in New Hampshire. Not real popular in the Democratic Party. She had this weird base of libertarians who, I don't know, I guess for some reason weren't attracted to the Libertarian Party. I'm not sure how that is. I don't know if we're going to see her popping up as a Libertarian candidate at some point. I don't know why she didn't just run as a Republican in the first place. Like, why was she in the Democratic Party? There's probably some, peculiar story about Hawaiian politics that explains that. I don't know what it is off the top of my head. But you see this, like Jimmy Dore, who was asked by Tulsi Gabbard, according to Jimmy Dore, to be a surrogate for her campaign, and he turned it down. This embrace of libertarians and the disaffected right wing. This is a grift because you turn to the right wing for support, for money, for whatever it is. You are necessarily lowering your standards. What defines the right wing? Bigotry, ignorance, narrow-mindedness. To keep up a grift with these people, to get their money, you have to play to those insecurities. You can't challenge them too much because they'll freak out on you. So just something to keep in mind. As we go into, I think, exactly that. Stoking the fears, the paranoias, the ignorance, playing right along with it and amplifying it, rather than trying to engage those people in constructive discourse, which will challenge them, challenge that ignorance, try to bring them up to the present moment and maybe beyond. No, instead, much easier to coddle them and their preconceived, incorrect, erroneous notions about the world, society, culture, politics, economics, etc., and probably to do what she's just about to do now. Let's watch.
Tell me what the cancel culture is and why we should be concerned with it.
Translation, tell me what to be afraid of. What is the new threat? What is the enemy of the week? Validate my victim complex, my imaginary persecution by people who want me to understand the world as it is.
Well, you rightly started this conversation talking about freedom. When you look at the foundation of our democracy, it is based on this ideal, this principle of freedom of speech.
I must have missed something because I didn't actually hear him talking about freedom. Also, freedom is one of these concepts which we really need to, you can't just talk about it in a vacuum. Freedom is kind of a relative term that needs to be discussed within particular bounds for it to have any kind of significant meaning. For example, if someone is experiencing emotional issues, which inhibit them from, exhibiting a whole range of behaviors that they might like to engage in, that's limiting. And then mastering those emotional issues would lead to relative freedom. Or, the same thing with something physical, having an injury which limits your mobility. Doing something about that. Okay, that gives you relative freedom. But just freedom in the abstract, it can mean so many different things depending on context that, again, it's just not meaningful to talk about it in and of itself. You can't just value freedom in and of itself. It is something that really has different meanings situation by situation. Okay, so that said, moreover, though, I'm not even sure he said the word freedom during that little introduction. So already Tulsi is starting on some pretty shaky ground.
Freedom for every single one of us to be able to share our ideas and debate them, to argue them, to agree or to disagree, to pick and choose in this marketplace of ideas those that we deem to be right or wrong, to be superior or inferior, and even for those ideas that may be misleading or dangerous, that in this free marketplace, we have the right to then defeat those ideas with superior ones, and others have the freedom to choose what they want to believe or not to believe, or what they want to adhere to. So when you...
Okay, couple points. First of all, I'm going to get to what she said, but we still haven't defined cancel culture, what we're talking about. That's not a term I use, okay? When I see people seeking accountability or change in policy, that's what it is. It's not cancel culture. It's people expressing their opinion on a topic. She's not talking about that. Okay, I just want to make that clear. Now, to just get into what she is talking about, she's talking about the marketplace of ideas, and again, talking in these totally vague abstractions that, like, what are we talking about? I really have no idea what she's talking about. She's saying things that actually don't make a ton of sense, but are designed to just get the right-wing Fox News audience just nodding along. You can see all the heads bobbing in agreement as people listen to this. But if you actually break down what she's saying, so we want to debate and discuss ideas and then defeat them, I believe she also said. Well, what happens to an idea after it has already been debated, discussed, and defeated? Isn't it canceled? I mean, to use this term, like, what do we do with those discarded ideas? Do we keep them around? Or do people speak up and say, hey, that's a shit idea. Here's evidence why it's a shit idea. And we actually already debated the idea. It's garbage. I mean, I think actually what they're trying to do is to stifle that debate, because what goes on in capitalism? The marketplace of ideas is not free and neutral. It's anything but. It's dominated by money. If you have a lot of money, you can put all that money behind that idea, no matter how fucking unpopular, socially destructive it is. You can ram it out there. That's what Fox News exists to do. That's what the bourgeois political parties exist to do. They're vehicles for capital to spread terrible ideas. So, we're not actually having that debate. The marketplace is not free. Nothing is free in capitalism. It's dominated by money. So, there are many ideas we would like to put to rest. And capitalists are, in fact, holding us in the past. And, as usual, we're subject to the ideas they want us to have. Any attempt by the people to do anything else is, oh, you're canceling us. Well, actually, we're voicing our opinion in a debate and a discussion about ideas and values. Let's hear more worthless claptrap from Tulsi Gabbard.
Look at this question, what is cancel culture? Cancel culture is the opposite of this. It is exactly the opposite of this foundational principle of our democracy.
That's right, by God, cancel culture is un-American. Tulsi Gabbard told me that. Right now, anyone supporting Tulsi Gabbard, hang your head in fucking shame for a week. Thank you.
Means that in a cancel culture, you have some people who believe that they are special, that they are superior, that they have the power to be able to shut down those who have ideas and views that are different, who may follow a path that they deem to be the wrong path, and will therefore say, nope, we're going to place obstacles in front of you, we're going to silence certain voices so that only those who agree with us in the path that we deem to be right is the one that is before you to choose. And the issue with this, there's...
This is such projection, I can't even handle it. The amount, but this is, again, conservatives love projecting. They can never own their faults. They have to attribute them to some enemy that they've invented to just avoid admitting wrongdoing. That is exactly what she's doing here. I just, and I think back to all the times that I encountered Tulsi supporters who would just scream at me for criticizing her over anything. This is worthless and empty, what she is saying. And it's totally welcome on Fox News. This is where she belonged in the first place.
There's a few issues, but the main issue with this is when you look at our rights and freedoms and our ability to debate them and respectfully come out the other end agreeing or disagreeing, as you and I have over the years, it's based on the fact that we are all children of God. And recognizing that, we then treat each other with respect and respect this freedom that we have. So let's look.
My jaw is still hanging open right now from when she said children of God. She might as well be wrapped literally in an American flag right now. The level of pandering she is doing is jaw-dropping. Wow. Also, notice what keeps striking me about this is how desperately she is trying to frame the issue, not in any concrete examples, because that would be debatable. You could actually say, look at this particular scenario. These are the facts. This is what happened. This is how different parties reacted to it. These were the outcomes. And then you could actually discuss in debates the merits of particular actions. Instead, everything is being wrapped up into this, bizarrely vague straw man of if you criticize anything, it's cancel culture. There's no examples. It's just this evidence-free attempt to just wrap up all criticisms of conservatives into this blanket, it's cancel culture and therefore an attack on our freedoms and democracy and everything that we hold dear. Whereas I think if you tied this into reality and said, this event happened, these parties did this about it, was it good or bad? But this is the, level of desperation. And, to just, again, to avoid exactly that criticism because they cannot debate it on the merits. They can't, it's exactly what they're projecting on other people. They can't debate things on the merits, pro or con. Their ideas are not popular, and they're losing popularity all the time. As capitalism, the crisis deepens, the contradictions heighten, people want change more and more. So they have to keep hypnotizing people, drugging them with this vague idealism that prevents any real action. And again, it's like a Rorschach blot that you can just sort of see what you want in it. They're just mystifying people. They're not helping anyone out. This is incredibly awful from Tulsi Gabbard. I was not a fan before. This is worse than I thought I would ever hear her. Let's continue.
Down the path and say, okay, well, where does this cancel culture lead us? You see the final expression of cancel culture in Islamist terrorist groups like ISIS.
So that is fucking despicable. She can't even say it herself. She's choking on the word. She's like, and people protesting some thing that is totally worth protesting. It's a hop, skip, and a jump from there to fucking beheading people and other things that U.S. propaganda says that Muslims are doing. Wow. She keeps increasing the tier of awfulness. There's still a decent amount of time left. Not looking good. Not looking good. And again, anybody who has been supporting her, time to sever ties. This is wretched.
Al-Qaeda, who basically go and behead those who they deem to be infidels or heretics in order to silence them, in order to protect others from being misled by those heretical ideas in the eyes of an ISIS or Al-Qaeda.
She can't even say it. Listen to how much she's stuttering, sputtering, stammering. She knows. She knows. She has hit the rails. Wow. Your Democratic candidate, folks. I'm blown away.
Really, Tulsi? Is that where you think all of this is headed? You think that there's going to be like woke mobs who behead people if they misgender someone or, use Latino or Latina in lieu of Latinx? Like, is that honestly where you think this is headed?
Okay.
We started with Mr. Potato Head and Dr. Seuss, and now we've arrived at this is going to be comparable to ISIS or something. Like, I don't even understand the point that she's trying to make. This is basically a non sequitur, but she's really trying. Like, she's trying so hard to convince Fox News' audience that this is serious. So what's more serious than like a literal terrorist organization that beheads people? If that doesn't get you to pay attention to how serious cancel culture is, then nothing will. So, I mean, she's getting the hang of how to do propaganda. Very interesting. She also says, when you look at the foundation of our democracy, it is based on this ideal, this principle of freedom. Unless, of course, you are a transgender individual who wants to participate in sports. Then you don't have the freedom to do that. Then Tulsi Gabbard is going to try to cancel you. No, Mike, but she's talking about freedom of speech. Oh, okay, so she's specifically limiting this conversation to discussions about freedom of speech. So when did Tulsi Gabbard, of all people, become the standard bearer for freedom of speech? Was it before or after she voted for AIPAC's resolution to condemn BDS? Like, I'm trying to figure this out here. Because if you condemn BDS, if you use your institutional power as a member of Congress to condemn BDS, which is a political movement, then it doesn't seem to me like we should be taking what you have to say seriously when you advocate for freedom of speech. Maybe you're not the best messenger, given that you've proven that you're not very supportive of freedom of speech. I mean, AIPAC and conservatives and even lots of Democrats across the country have been trying to crack down on freedom of speech of BDS activists, individuals who are literally just advocating for human rights for Palestinians, advocating that Israel stop its abuse of Palestinians. So why isn't Tulsi Gabbard speaking to that? Like, if you're pro-free speech, wouldn't that be like the utmost concern to you? There was a teacher in Texas who was fired because she wouldn't sign a pro-Israel loyalty pledge. Why isn't Tulsi Gabbard speaking about that? So she doesn't actually care about freedom of speech. If she did, she could have proven it when she was a member of Congress. But she spent her time, her remaining time as a member of Congress anyways, trying to get abortions banned. I think it was late-term abortions, which are already illegal unless like the life of the mother is literally in danger. Like, is this really someone who we want to prop up as like the best advocate of freedom of speech in America, who's anti-cancel culture? Give me a break. She also says, when you look at our rights and our freedom.
Okay, so before Mike gets into that, I just want to jump in with a comment before I wind up playing 5 minutes straight of his video. I think he's done a decent job on this topic. I think that there are potential problems when you start to get into real specifics about, I mean, the BDS is a good example of hypocrisy on freedom of speech. However, I think that promoting the idea that we should take any of these politicians very seriously in the first place, like holding their records to, full account base, I think we should actually cancel, for lack of a better term, these people. Just chuck the whole thing out before we even get to that point. Because if you had Tulsi Gabbard in there, do you think she would really answer that question on BDS? Like, do you think she cares about any kind of consistency? I mean, what she was saying in that Fox News thing, basically, I mean, that was her pitch for new supporters. She was basically pleading with those people, look, I'll say anything you want to. I will completely like rubber stamp your victim complex, your like imagined persecution by the woke mobs, any attempts at holding conservative white people to account for anything. Please, I'm your person. Tulsi Gabbard is young. She is struggling to figure out what she's going to do for the rest of her public career. And she's basically on her knees groveling to the Fox News audience, please find a use for me. That's what's going on here. It's not about any kind of principle. So I think that discussing it in those kind of concrete terms, yes, it can be useful to point out the hypocrisy, but really we've got to get to the principles behind it, the larger principles at play, because the people who are swayed by things like that don't actually care about hypocrisy. They can't think on that level. They don't have the critical thinking to, really have the hypocrisy land with them. That's why they're so susceptible to, being manipulated by hypocrites. I think that to really counter things like that, we've got to go beyond just saying, well, this politician said this, but then they did that. Isn't that hypocritical? Because people can always find ways to weasel out of that. As Marxists, we try to look at the system beyond to come up with explanations for why all of these bad actors do what they do. Largely because the system demands it. The interests of the capitalist class mandate that, they need Tulsi Gabbards. They need people like this doing what she's doing. So trying to call out the hypocrisy, I just don't think it's going to land with the people who are swayed by this. We need to find other routes to doing that. That is where I would critique Mike on this. I would give him about a B+ so far. Not bad. Again, I would just hit on slightly different points. Let's see where he goes with it.
And our ability to debate them and respectively come out the other end, disagreeing or agreeing, is based on the fact that we are all children of God, and recognizing that when we treat each other with respect and respect this freedom that we have. So basically, this is all the freedom to speak freely and disagree and agree. It all stems from the fact that we're children of God. The fact that we're children of God. First of all, we're not children of God. That's not a literal fact. There's no evidence that God exists. And even if there was evidence that God did exist, there's no evidence that we are his children. So what you're saying here is completely bizarre and nonsensical. And I don't get how this relates to freedom of speech and cancel culture. It seems like you're just pandering to Fox News' right-wing audience because you're starting a podcast yourself and you want to make sure that their viewers follow you to your new platform. And I'm sorry, but I got to point out again that if we're talking about us all being children of God, why does Tulsi Gabbard apparently exclude trans people? Are they not God's children? Are Palestinians not God's children? There are so many issues in America that we could be focusing on. There are thousands of Americans dying every single year because they don't have health care. There is an entire generation burdened with student debt. They can't buy houses. They can't buy cars. They can't start a family. They can't start families, I should say, to be grammatically correct. There's so many issues, a seemingly infinite number of issues to talk about. I mean, climate change is going to completely wipe out so many species because of human activity, because of anthropogenic climate change. And Tulsi Gabbard is choosing to focus on cancel culture. Fox News is choosing to focus on Mr. Potato Head and Dr. Seuss.
All right, and that's the end of the video. So when we go hanging with the SOCDEM gang, which is now a regular thing here on Socialism for All, anarchists, socialists, communists, and social democrats, we could say, are on the broader left. We have significant differences between those different groups I just named. However, we are left of the status quo. On some issues, we are going to agree more. And on some issues, we're going to have wider gaps in our agreement or disagreement. I think Mike Figuerado did a basically good job on this video. Again, I would have emphasized slightly different points, and I did, but not a bad start. So here's one case of hanging with the SOCDEM gang that wasn't a train wreck. Good job, Mike Figuerado. And that's the video. Thanks to our current patrons whose names are on the screen. If you'd like to get your name on the screen or just support us financially, you can go to patreon.com/socialism for all and sign up for a monthly donation. You can also follow us at facebook.com/socialism, the number 4 all. Used to have a page at FOR all, and it got throttled to death by Zuck. Here on YouTube, please click the like button, subscribe button, and the notifications bell. Please leave a comment if you can, and please share our video wherever you're online, your Twitter feed, your Discord servers, Reddit subs, etc. All of that helps more people to see this content, whether it's in the YouTube algorithm or just posting it on other sites. All of that's helpful. All of you out there supporting and promoting this content makes it all go that much more smoothly. We need to end capitalism, normalize talking about socialism today, and it's really kind of our only hope for a better tomorrow. Thanks for all you do, and we will catch you in the next video.